This work is about a connection between automata theory and the lambda calculus. To present it, let us start with automata, and in particular with regular expressions, which are a way to describe languages. By a language, we mean a set of strings, and for instance, this expression here represents the strings over the alphabet AB that have an even number of A's. So by definition, a language that can be defined this way is a regular language. This class of languages also admits several other characterizations. For instance, this language L here can be defined as the inverse image of 0 by the function that assigns to each string the parity of the number of A's, mod 2. So this is actually a monoid morphism, since it sends the concatenation of strings to the addition in Z mod 2. And so in general, the language is regular if and only if it is the inverse image of some monoid morphism with a finite codomain. This algebraic characterization is actually very close to the more familiar deterministic finite automata, and well, you can also describe regular languages by non-deterministic automata or by monadic second-order logic, for instance. But what will be of interest to us here is a characterization by functional programming. This is part of an area called implicit complexity that aims to characterize complexity classes using high-level programming languages. Our starting point is a theorem of Hillebrand and Kanellakis, which says that regular languages are those definable by programs mapping strings to booleans for a certain choice of encodings in the simply type lambda calculus, which is the theoretical core of real-world programming languages such as OCaml or Haskell, and it is also very close to proof theory via the Curry-Howard correspondence. Our work consists in giving an analogous characterization of the smaller class of star-free languages. This is a classical object of formal language theory that can be described as a restriction of regular expressions or by several other formalisms such as aperiodic finite monoids, which we'll come back to later, and our result is that it corresponds actually to a non-commutative lambda calculus. So this is part of a broader project to do for automata theory what implicit complexity has done for complexity classes. Now, to give more background, let us talk about the lambda calculus. As a programming language, it consists of syntactic expressions built out of two constructors, f space t and lambda x dot t, whose intended meaning is respectively function application and function definition. Now, in usual mathematical practice, when you have a function defined by a symbolic expression, you can evaluate it by substituting the argument for the variable. Accordingly, in the lambda calculus, we define a rewrite rule that sends lambda x dot t applied to u to t where x has been substituted by u. Iterating this rewrite rule corresponds to executing a program. You might have noticed that there is no data type in the lambda calculus. There are only functions, but functions can be used to encode data. For instance, let's take the booleans, which can be defined by the following lambda terms. To make sense of this, note that a function that takes x to a function that takes y can be seen simply as a function that takes the pair xy of two arguments. There is a canonical isomorphism between the two. So true takes two arguments and returns the first one, while false takes two arguments and returns the second one. You can also encode strings using the so-called church encoding as follows. You can see that the letters of the word occur here. What happens morally is that the encoding of a word takes two functions and composes them according to the letters in the word. On top of all this, one can add types, which act as specifications. So in our case, we're going to use simple types built out of a single base type O using a function arrow. Just like programs, types are purely syntactic expressions, and by induction on the syntax, one defines what it means for a program to be of some type. Coming back to the example of booleans, they can be given this type O to O to O, which means functions that take two arguments of type O and return a value of type O. So true and false both fit this type, and conversely, any program of such a type is equal modulo our rewriting semantics to either true or false. As for strings, they can also be typed using this type. Let us mention that the type system ensures termination of programs, whereas the type lambda calculus allows divergence but is Turing complete. And now we can formally state the theorem of Hillebrand and Kanellakis. A language is regular if and only if it can be defined by a program with a type like this one. Observe that this is string to bool as expected, but in the input type you may substitute the base type O by any arbitrary simple type A. By a generic argument, this indeed makes sense since the encodings of strings can be given this type. And let us also mention that the key idea behind this theorem is that the church encoding looks a lot like a monoid morphism. So this may seem contrived to build a bridge with automata theory, but actually, the use of iterators to represent data in the lambda calculus goes back to the 1930s, so it predates automata theory. What we want now is to get a similar theorem for star-free languages. As their name suggests, these are defined by regular expressions without the repetition star, but to compensate for that, one can use complementation. For instance, the language AB star can be formulated by the following star-free regular expression, which uses complementation. Now, given a regular expression, it is not clear whether this can be done. For instance, AA star, which differs by a single letter from AB star, does not have a star-free regex. To decide whether a language is star-free, one typically uses Schusenberger's theorem, which says that a language is star-free if and only if it is an inverse image by a monoid morphism whose codomain is finite and aperiodic. So, this is like the characterization of regular languages, except that we have this aperiodicity condition defined as follows. For all x in the monoid, there exists some exponent n, such that x to the n equals x to the n plus 1. That is, the sequence of iterated powers of x eventually stabilizes as follows. Coming back to AA star, one can see that its minimal monoid is z mod 2, which is not aperiodic since you get a cycle of length 2 when you iterate the powers of 1, or rather its multiples since we have an additive monoid. The question now becomes, how do we translate this constraint into a type lambda calculus? The first remark would be that Boolean negation is not aperiodic, since it also has a cycle of length 2. So one must find a way to exclude Boolean negation from the definable functions in the lambda calculus. Recall that the encoding of Booleans that you use is such that applying a Boolean to two arguments amounts to performing a conditional. So that means that negation is going to be the exchange of the two branches of the conditional, that is, the exchange of the two arguments, leading to a term that looks like this. But how could one justify excluding this? Well, one can say that the order of arguments should matter, so that a function that takes b, then x, then y should not use x after y, since it runs contrary to the order that the arguments are given in. So this is what is called a non-commutative lambda calculus. So far so good, but this is not enough, since we now run into an issue. In this lambda term, there is an external function taking 3 arguments f, x, y, which are actually used in the right order, f, x, then y. And there is an internal function taking an argument z, and here there are some subtleties in the interaction between the outer variables and the inner variables, but it turns out that the right condition is to ask for f to be before z, which is the case here. So this looks okay, but now if we apply our rewriting semantics of the lambda calculus, then we get this, where we have this variable z of the function lambda z dot fzz, which we substitute by the argument xy. And now you see that there is a problem. There is an y before an x. So why did that happen? It's because in lambda z dot fzz, the argument z is used twice. This induces a duplication of the subterm xy, and the violation of non-commutativity appears in the interaction between those two copies, here and here. So how do we prevent that? Well, we can just prohibit duplication. So this is an idea that comes from linear logic. Essentially, we ask functions to use each of their arguments at most once. Such functions are called affine, and so we are working in a non-commutative affine lambda calculus. But this is a very strong constraint, and for instance, the encoding of strings that we saw earlier does not respect it, because typically here the encoding of ABB uses FB twice, and in general it will use FB as many times as there are B's in the string. So really, what we want is to be able to selectively enforce affineness and non-commutativity constraints. For this purpose, we'll consider a calculus with 2 function types. One of them will be the unrestricted function type, denoted by the usual function arrow, and the other will be denoted by this linear function arrow. The meaning of this is as follows. A function that takes an affine argument x, then an unrestricted argument y, then an affine argument z, can use each of x and z at most once, this is affineness, cannot use x after z, this is non-commutativity, and as for y, there is no condition on y since it's an unrestricted argument. The system that we're describing here already exists in the literature up to a small detail. In Polakov and Fenning's paper, instead of having affine functions, you have linear functions which must use their arguments exactly once instead of at most once. So we add the weakening rule that allows a function to discard its argument. In this system, one can define a refined version of the Church encoding of strings where some arrows have become affine function arrows. And the encoding of the string ABB will now look like this. You also have a type of affine booleans where all function arrows become affine. And now we can state our main theorem. A language is star-free if and only if it can be defined in our non-commutative affine lambda calculus by some program sending strings to bool with an affine function arrow here, and again here one can perform a substitution in the input type depending on some chosen type A. But this A is now subject to a constraint. It must be purely affine, that is, it cannot contain any unrestricted function arrow. We can now say a few words about how to prove this equivalence. To show that every definable language is star-free, the key lemma is that for a purely affine type A, the monoid of functions from A to A definable in our lambda calculus, modulo the rewriting rule, is finite and aperiodic. So in particular, this means that there cannot be a Boolean negation because its existence would make bool to bool into a non-aperiodic monoid. For the converse direction, we actually prove something stronger. We show that aperiodic sequential transducers can be encoded as the type string to string, again with the substitution in the input. So what's a sequential transducer? It's an automaton like this, and if you look at the labels on the edges, on the left of the vertical bar, you have an input letter being read, that is, you take this transition when you read a B in the input, and then on the right of the vertical bar, you have a corresponding output. So every time the transducer is in state QA and then reads B, it outputs A. For these sequential transducers, one can define what it means to be aperiodic. It might seem that doing so turns our initial problem into a more complicated one, but the advantage of transducers is that they admit a prime decomposition theorem, the so-called Cron-Rhodes decomposition, which says that the function implemented by any aperiodic sequential transducer can be obtained as a composition of transducers with two states, such as this one. So it suffices to show that one can encode two-state aperiodic transducers and to show that definable functions from strings to strings can be composed in this non-commutative affine lambda calculus. And since, after all, it is a functional programming language, it is no surprise that composition works. The natural question, then, is whether the string-to-string functions that can be defined in this way, in this lambda calculus, correspond exactly to aperiodic sequential transducers. And the answer is no. The class that one obtains is actually the larger class of aperiodic regular functions, also known as the first-order transductions, and this is not part of the paper, but it will be shown in an upcoming work. One can also wonder whether non-commutativity really is essential for our result, since maybe it is the affineness that plays the key role. To answer this objection, we show that if we were to replace this type system by a commutative affine type system, we would get regular languages instead of star-free languages. So really, this shows that non-commutative types have interesting computational consequences. They are computationally meaningful. In conclusion, we gave a characterization of star-free languages, that is, to our knowledge, the first use of non-commutative types in implicit computational complexity. As far as we know, our result also provides the smallest class that has ever been captured by type-theoretic implicit complexity. Indeed, star-free languages are a strict subclass of uniform AC0. There are a few other works that have found this kind of connections between programming languages and automata theory. We've already mentioned several times the result by Hillebrand and Kanellakis characterizing regular languages in the simply typed lambda calculus, so that was in 1996. In the 20 years that followed, it seems that there were no implicit automata results at all, at least we couldn't find any. And then in 2016, there was a paper that provided a characterization of the functions computed by sequential transducers. You might remember these from the last slide. It relies on what's called a circular proof system. And okay, we say proof system, but it can also be seen as a programming language via the proof as programs correspondence. And then 3 years later, another group that didn't know about this work essentially did the same thing, characterizing regular languages using circular proofs. Something interesting is that both of these rely on an affine proof system, just as we used in our work an affine type system. So recall that affine means without duplication. And what's interesting in the work of Kupperberg, Pino and Puss is that they show that if you add duplication, then what you get instead of regular languages is logarithmic space. There are a few other works that one could put into this box, and outside of implicit complexity, there are other connections between automata and the lambda calculus or proof theory. So for instance, take the church encodings. They are a key ingredient in our theorem. We took this idea from Hillebrand and Kanellakis, but actually it also appears in the area of higher order model checking, which is an approach to the verification of functional programs. The connections run even deeper, and we won't give details here, but let's say, for instance, that the technique of evaluation in finite semantics is used both in higher order model checking and in the work of Hillebrand and Kanellakis. The above-mentioned circular proofs have also been used outside of implicit complexity stuff for topics which are related to automata and formal verification. As for non-commutative types, that's an idea that goes back to the 90s. It was proposed by Lambeck in order to do mathematical linguistics. There's also a whole line of work that considers proofs and programs as geometrical objects. So typically, you can take the syntax trees of lambda calculus programs, add edges connecting variables to binders, and this gives you graphs. Proofs in linear logic also admit graphical representations known as proof nets. A particularly compelling manifestation of this idea in recent years has been the work of Noam Zeilberger and his collaborators on bijective combinatorics of the lambda calculus. They show that non-commutative lambda terms are in bijection with so-called planar combinatorial maps. So what's next? We've got a lot of things to say about transducers, which are automata models that compute functions instead of languages. For instance, using affine types, we can characterize regular functions, a class of functions which is strictly larger than that computed by sequential transducers. This hasn't been done before, but it's not too surprising that it works, because there is a machine model for regular functions that has been known for 10 years, the so-called copyless SSTs, where the copyless keyword refers precisely to an affineness condition. By using non-commutative types, one can get first-order transductions, as we mentioned in the previous slide. And we also observed that some feature in tree transducer models can be directly related to the notion of additive connective in linear logic. One last remark. A tool that we use in order to establish these concrete equivalence results and also to understand these connections better is denotational semantics. In particular, we derive from streaming tree transducers a categorical semantics that is very similar to the dialectica categories, while we also use the geometry of interaction, or GOI, to relate lambda calculus programs to automata models such as two-way transducers or tree walking automata. So that's it. The full paper is online on Hall. You can check out this URL. And there is also a preprint containing a draft of the sequel to this paper. Thank you for your attention.